Recently on LinkedIn, I've seen a number of posts where people talk about how to pick an e-discovery vendor. And they were talking about different tips. They're giving different tips to each other, like what you could ask for. And I thought, well, I have some opinions on the matter as well. Plus, I work for a vendor, so I know some of the insights that others may not. So I want to share a few tips and opinions about what works and doesn't work about selecting an e-discovery vendor. And the way we'll start is with the least useful things and go towards more useful. Let's try it in that order. So one popular thing people say is you should send a security questionnaire to the vendor to make sure they comply with all the security and something. And I think that's the least useful thing you can do. Every vendor, no matter what their actual situation is, what their actual security is, they're finding all kinds of creative ways or ways to interpret themselves as to be compliant with pretty much any security questionnaire you could throw at them. Sure, there's some exceptions, maybe like some high-level ISO stuff or whatever, I'm not even sure what they're called. But generally speaking, no matter which vendor you send security questionnaire to, they will find a way to make sure they're compliant with the requirements for that company. So security questionnaires are not helpful at all. Next thing people talked about is uptime guarantee, or what the uptime is. And again, I find it to be not super helpful, because how do you define uptime? Is there scheduled maintenance, unscheduled? You can always interpret things different ways. The only way that I could see it being helpful, if you get reimbursed due to some kind of unexpected downtime. You know, if the maintenance wasn't announced and that server is not accessible, well, are you going to get some kind of credit for it? You're going to get paid by the vendor if their systems went down in an unscheduled manner. That's the only situation where it could be useful, is having some kind of uptime guarantee, or you get reimbursed certain amount of money per hour that the system is down. Another popular thing to ask is if vendor is using cloud or on-prem or the data center solution. To me, it's kind of useless. It doesn't really matter where data gets stored. They can go in a data center or in the cloud, as long as they're sufficiently backed up and you have good access to your data. That's really all that matters. So let me explain. Backups. You may want to get some kind of written statement from a vendor, how often backups happen, and make sure you have that in writing, that you have some assurances that your data is safe. As far as reasonably accessing your data, the one thing that bugs me more than anything is lag. Slow systems where you just click on things, you see a spinning wheel, some kind of delays. Lag bothers me more than anything else. And this is where you would actually evaluate your vendors, send them sample data, make sure everything works fine and you don't have any lag and system is responsive. You could have data center and cloud solutions that are laggy and slow and frustrating to use. So I would test it rather than just asking them and saying, oh, if you're in the cloud, then it should be fast or something like that. Another question you can ask a vendor is what kind of volume they can handle. And this is not a bad question to ask. It's generally not as useful unless you have a project that has a certain amount of data coming in. So for example, you have, let's just make up a number, you have 1 terabyte of data that you want to send to vendor every week. So Monday, they're going to get a hard drive with 1 terabyte of data, and you want to be able to review that data following Monday. And then that following Monday, they're going to have another terabyte and another, and it's going to be the cycle that's going to be continuing over and over. And this is where you can ask them, can you meet this turnaround cycle? You get 1 terabyte per week, and I get to see that terabyte on an ongoing basis. So that's a really valid way to ask about a capacity. The not so good ways is just asking, what's your processing capacity per week? And the vendor will make up whatever number. And then if they can't meet that deadline, they're gonna say, well, this is the data not that how it was described. There is some problem with this data. There are too many Excels or something like that. Or they'll say, well, that's our overall capacity. Not all the capacity is available to you. So you want to ask specifically, right? I'm going to have this project, 1 terabyte per week. Can you do that for that exact project? And then it becomes a really valid question, and you can evaluate if the vendor's capacity can handle the amount of data you have. All right, well, what about what kind of software is vendor using? That's a really valid question. If your review team is used to using certain review software, well, it may be important to you that they have same experience that they're used to, because they're going to be quicker. They know how to run searches, same syntax, all that stuff. So that's a good question to ask. If it's just processing, it likely doesn't matter what software they use, because they'll be able to make load file with whatever fields you need. But if it's on a review, you're going to be using them for a review. Yes, it's a good question to ask, but I do say don't be afraid to try other software. People get locked in like, oh, I'm so used to just this, and then they forget how others could do same thing but better. So don't be afraid to get a demo of software you haven't seen before and see if it could be better. All right, let's talk about some of the things that I really value in a vendor. And number one thing is responsiveness. How responsive they are to your emails and to your calls. If you send an email, do they respond to you quickly? Or do you have to wait for few hours, follow up with another email or a phone call? To me, that would be something I'm looking for, is for them to at least acknowledge my request, and possibly if it's a quick something quick like add a field to a layout or something like that, that they're really quick at it and they're bam, and it's done, and you're not sitting around waiting. Another thing that'd be important to me is, can they consult me? Let's say I don't know something, I need help with something. Can they talk me through the process, explain how things will work? So for example, if I'm doing a text message review that I have never done before, I say, okay, here, I'm sending you the Slack data, I have no idea what to do. And can they tell me, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to take your data, we're going to convert it in so-and-so format, we'll put it into review, it's going to look like this, then we get to production part, it's going to look like that. Here are the choices you're going to have to make, and here's the final result, right? So can they do that? Can they consult you in things you don't know and walk you through the entire workflow so you understand how it's going to go? The other side of it, of course, is they could be just responsive to what you ask them, like, hey, you want me to do this? I'll do this. You ask me this? That's exactly how I do it. That's not really what you want in a vendor. You want them to be looking forward and trying to come up with the process and know what the pitfalls are and consult you to make sure the review and productions are all going to go smoothly. And speaking of consulting, can they deal with non-standard problems? Can they figure things out? Do they have capacity to create custom solutions for you? Let's say you have a problem with certain file format, or again, like I said, like a just Slack, maybe have a JSON file that needs to be parsed. Are they able to do it? Can they figure that out? Do they have capacity to solve problems that are not built into normal software? Do they just click a button and say, okay, processing done? Or can they actually go further and solve something that the software can't do? And lastly, are they pleasant to deal with? Again, it's subjective, but do you enjoy working with people who answer your phone calls and your emails? You could have a team of 2, 3, 4 people who you're dealing with. Are they nice to deal with? Do they speak clearly? Do they explain problems clearly? Are they courteous? Are they available? Are they just pleasant to deal with overall, like person-to-person communication? Do you want to call them and ask, or do you always hate calling them? You're like, oh man, I'm gonna get that guy again, and yeah, I guess he's kind of knowledgeable, but he's kind of a jerk, and I don't really feel like calling or talking to them. If you have that, well, then you have a problem. You want to have a vendor who it is pleasant to interact with. So to me, it all comes down to people. That's the most important part. Who are you going to be working with? Who are you going to be dealing? Can they solve problems? I wouldn't put so much effort into technology, because even if they don't have enough, processing capacity, you can always buy more servers. That's not a big deal. It's hard to get good people. It's easy to buy servers. So this all, of course, assuming that that vendor can get the work done, right? If they're always screw up processing or send you bad productions, obviously you can't rely on them, but we're assuming that they're able to handle normal Blitz support requests. It all comes down to people. That's my opinion. If you guys think differently, put it in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube. I'll see you next time.